I'm trying to fit in with the hat. If you're wondering what's about the hat, I'm just trying to fit in. But I just want to say one other thing before I bring in this glorious panel I've got for you today. It's going to be a shop window for amazing Canadian innovation and technology. So I'm sure you're going to love it if a lot of you are locals. So this is how I felt the first thing this morning when I woke up. Woke up this morning, Energy Disruptors on my mind. And I've got a fantastic panel. Do you want to see them now? Yes, okay, so I'm going to give you all four of them. We're going to come in, we're going to have a 60-second, what do they do, so you know where they are, frame what's happening. We do want to hear your questions, so please don't be shy. So who have we got? We've got Ralph Ibendahl, who's Managing Director and Head of Capital EMEA at RBC Capital Market. He understands about investment, he understands about money, he definitely understands about technology. We've got Chris Doornbos. Chris is President, CEO, and Director of E3 Lithium. I'm sure some of you in the room know a number of these people. Ibendahl, there you go, Chris, you've got a shout out. Ibendahl, who's CEO and founder of Summit Nanotech Corporation. Well, there you go, big it up for Amanda. And then we've got Hamutal Bassat, VP Business Development at Nano Materials Corporation, an amazing company having an incredible run at the moment. I'm sure you've seen it, of investment, which is the real significant indicator of where is this technology going, what's the value in it, what might happen next. So this is an amazing panel of four people. It's going to be a Canadian shop window, like I say. So can we give them a big round of applause as they come onto the stage, please? Thank you. Good to see you. Yeah, I think you're over here. Cheers, Ralph. Cheers, Chris. Cheers, Amanda. Here's Hamutal. There you are. Wonderful. So, like I said at the beginning, just as the intro, we're going to have a quick 60-second. It's a 60-second challenge. Is that okay? I'm springing it upon you now. Is that all right? Okay, so a 60-second challenge to say what it is that the business does. Not so much about you, because we're going to discover that as we have the conversation. So, yeah, Ralph, 60 seconds, go.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Ralph Ibendahl. I run the RBC Energy Transition Investment Banking business for Europe. What does that mean? We work with smaller companies looking to scale up, large companies that are looking to take their part in the transition, and work with financial investors to deploy capital. It's really about providing strategic advice and funding advice to our clients.
Wow, you had time to spare. Yeah, Chris.
Chris Doornbos, I'm the CEO of E3 Lithium. So a lesser known fact about Alberta, we've got the world's largest lithium resources here in the province, 48 million tons of lithium, double the next competitor in global jurisdictions, which is Bolivia. So E3 is here to develop those resources. We've been around since 2016, developing technology, but more to the point, developing this amazing resource that Alberta has, and hoping to be one of Canada's first producers of this critical mineral, going what they call DLP, direct lithium processing, so all the way to the end, to a battery product that can sell to chem factories.
Wonderful. Amanda.
Hi, everyone. Ibendahl, CEO of Summit Nanotech. At Summit, we have homegrown Calgary-based technology that extracts lithium from brine, and we're at the tip of the spear in Chile right now, operating and pulling lithium out of the ground and turning it into a battery-grade product. We're going to be selling that internationally, of course, and working with South Americans to get lithium to the automakers as fast as we can.
Good. Fast is good. We were all hearing that the timeline challenge in all of that is epic. So, Hamutal, Nano One, you're cooking at the moment, aren't you? I didn't say you're on fire, because that's the wrong turn. That's be the wrong line of. But you're doing so well at the moment. So give us that glimpse of what Nano One's all about, please.
Yeah. So we're here to change how the world makes battery materials. We've come up with a new manufacturing technology that allows for a simple process with zero waste that can make very high quality product that goes straight into the battery. One of the things that we do is make sure that this actually gets to the market. So we recently invested in acquiring an LFP manufacturing facility in Quebec, where we're going to convert the plant to use our one-pot process and make great material with zero waste.
Wonderful. Well, I think all of that deserves a round of applause. These are people, come on. Individuals and companies that are actually doing something about the challenge that we've got. Yes, we're hearing, we did yesterday, we're hearing today about why we're doing it. We're talking about sort of when we're doing it, but how we're doing it is the challenge. It's the practical application of this principle of change. And yes, Canada has been all about, for many, many years, about extraction. Here's the good news. Canada, for many more years to come, is going to be all about extraction. So in some ways, whilst the change seems daunting, the concern about will I still have a job? How will I look after my family? What's going to happen to the economy? All of those things must be in people's minds. They should be in people's minds. The good news is, from hearing what you're all doing, there's opportunity for transition, for people to, retrain, which sounds sometimes a bit glib. Can I retrain in the town I live? Am I going to have to move from east to west? What's going to go on? But we'll get into all of that, the meat and potatoes of all of that. But let's just frame this simply as two things: challenge and opportunity. So at the moment, we've got this epic challenge. Not going to reiterate it all, because we've been hearing about it yesterday and certainly this morning. So Hamutal, let me ask you this question. How do you put your business, Nano One, into the global shop window? How are you getting access to these OEMs and people that you're going to be your clients? How do you do that?
So I think very early on we realized that it's about building a new supply chain. So it's not enough to speak with your off-takers, the OEMs in this case, or the cathode active material makers, or the metal, the mining and the refiners, etc. You actually have to work all the way. And our policy has been to have that conversation and create this type of collaborations all along the supply chain. So we have our strategic collaboration and investment with Rio Tinto, which deals with the mining side of things, the raw materials. One of the things that we do is we're able to use metals in their metal form rather than their sulfates. So we've been building that relationship. We have joint development agreements with various cathode active material companies that would enable to validate the material, make sure that the process is sustainable, both economically and from an environmental perspective. And then last but not least, discussions with the OEMs, with the end users, to make sure that there's actually demand for what we're creating. So you really have to work both ends of the supply chain, the supply and the demand, in order to make sure that the technology gets accepted and brought into the market.
Right, okay. And Chris, can I ask you a question then about the timing and the framing of all this? We heard Simon Moore's presentation earlier about, the epic challenge to it all. I think a slide Simon didn't put up, but I got a sneak preview of it yesterday, was 28 gigafactories in North America, knocking out 275 gigawatts of battery production year in, year out. Is that really going to happen, Chris?
Well, I think that, the factories are quite easy to build, right? In the sense that it's an engineering challenge. But when you look at the real challenge to get those factories filled with the materials, exploration and development is a high risk, low capital gain in terms of sense it's hard to get capital to fund them. So Simon's point was very clear that the bottleneck to what we're doing in these gigafactories is likely going to be the critical raw materials. And we haven't even matured the industry yet to say what are the source of these materials, because at some point that social conscience, which is being advertised, needs to come to play too. And I think that's where Canada has the advantage, because we have the critical raw materials, but these industries in Canada, while we're great at mineral resources, lithium is nascent in Canada. And there's a gap forming right now for Canadians to participate in this new growing ecosystem. People are talking about $1 trillion size of business that we can participate in. And Canada has a very, very small part today to play in that. So,
how many gigafactories are planned in Canada, for example?
I think 2 gigafactories and a couple of CAM factories.
2?
Yeah. Of 372.
I don't want to be rude. Is anyone surprised by that? That doesn't seem to be very many. Given the size of the country, the opportunity you've got with all the materials, it seems to me like you're exporting a lot of stuff that someone else is going to make a lot of money out of. So on that point, Ralph, Chris mentioned their capital markets and all the rest of it. Where does this figure in the scheme of things? Because to put it very simply, and forgive me if this sounds simplistic, I'm going to build a gigafactory. It's going to be, 24 gigawatts output. It's going to cost $4-5 billion, but I don't know where I'm getting the supply chain. I don't know who's going to buy the stuff. I don't know who the people are going to work in the place. How are people pitching this to get investment?
Yeah, a great question, and it's a story we see a lot, actually. There's 28 gigafactories planned in Europe. I think Simon talked about 32, but somewhere in that 30 range. The truth is, not many of them are actually producing today. And why are they not producing, and what's the biggest challenge? It's actually getting access to the mineral side, having an offtake with an OEM, and having the funding to support it. And I think when how do I square that circle? If I don't have the minerals and I don't have the offtake, how do I get the funding? Actually you have to work collaboratively. You have to work together, and in reality there is a gap sometimes in funding markets as to where that money can come from. So one of the things we did is we mapped out all of the energy transition investors that are looking to deploy capital. Some of those are on the infrastructure side, some of those are on the VC side, and try and understand where that capital can go. But there is still a gap, and sometimes governments, in reality, have to still step in where the technology risk or the offtake risk is too great.
Well, on that point about governments, we all know in the room what's happening at the moment in terms of Russia and Ukraine and the impact that's having on supply chains, perhaps the unintended consequences or some realities that people weren't prepared for. I don't know how this is going to sound, but given our total reliance on China at the moment for so much, if there's an issue with Taiwan, what's that going to do with this whole journey of progress and change and where we go? Amanda, I know it's a pretty tricky political question there, but do you think we need to really get on with this reshoring, localizing, getting it all done so we've got it's not anti-China or anti-Russia, it's pro-balance. What's your sense of that?
Yeah, we saw it play out in the oil and gas sector as well, where energy security is a huge issue with countries around the world, especially when a war comes along. And it will be no different for battery metals. Lithium is labeled a critical, actually it's a nationally protected critical mineral for a reason. But it's going to be a long time before we have domestic supply chains operational and sustainable. So in the meantime, we have to rely on partnerships with countries that we trust. That's why South America is so important in all of this. And we need to build the infrastructure locally as fast as we can to get that supply chain up and running. To your point, like what's going on in Russia and Ukraine and our trepidation with China even, it's so important to pay attention to these things and to not dismiss them as problems that we don't have to deal with today.
Yeah, well, I think, I imagine a lot of people have heard Gillian yesterday, Gillian from the FT, talking about we have to take into account many more things than the classic things we have been taking into account, including absolutely geopolitics. And there's a very good book by John Elkington called Green Swans, The Coming Boom in Regenerative Capitalism, which I'd recommend to anybody, because what we've been seeing of late, of course, are the black swans, these unexpected events which have been pretty cataclysmic in one way or the other. But I did say I'm going to make this as interactive as possible, and I'm always focused on the time. Anonymous always comes to these events. Have you noticed that? There's always, Anonymous always comes and turns up. Chris, I want to ask you this question. Retraining is important, yet not a lot of companies invest in change management, especially in oil and gas. How do we change that? Can you help with that question?
Yeah, I think one of the benefits that we have in Alberta, I'm just going to sort of change this a little bit, and I'll come back to the answer to that specific, but repurposing what we are doing in terms of moving from an oil and gas industry to a lithium industry, we operate the same as oil and gas. So in Alberta, the reskilling is actually fairly small to get a lithium industry locally. And that goes up to a certain point. So, drilling a well, putting in a pipeline, doing the water treatment side of things, we do that every day in Alberta. It's a very small step. In fact, most of the people in our office, except for one person, has been hired from Alberta's workforce. We're 30 people now because we have the talent here locally. But there is the next step that does need to be retrained in Alberta, and that is we have to make a product that's sellable. And unlike in the oil and gas world where you can pump out the raw crude, separate it out into a raw product and sell it on the market, and there's a whole ecosystem that deals with it, lithium doesn't work like that. You have to make the battery quality products to get the value. And so for us, then that skill set to develop from what we make, which is the first piece, right, which is attuned to the crude oil, you have to then refine that into the gasoline product, which is lithium hydroxide or lithium carbonate. And when we say DLP, that's what we're referring to, is going all the way from a molecule of lithium in a resource to a molecule of lithium that's in a battery. And so that skill set does need to be retrained. How we do it is we start small and we build. And the Alberta industry is nascent, but it's begrudging. There's huge amounts of new companies, new skill coming into the province right now. Amanda's company is technology. There's a couple other technology companies. When you look at Alberta's lithium ecosystem, and a lot of it's still private, so you don't see it as much, there's, I think, 4 technology companies and 4 resource companies for lithium in Alberta already that are, and it's coming, and we're bringing the skill set with us.
Okay, Amanda, do you want to add on to that then by maybe answering that question there? How's the panel found building their in-house team, and how hard or easy have they found acquiring that talent in Alberta?
I'd love to just build on what Chris was saying too. I think it's a mindset change that's happening. 4 years ago, when I was up on stage, I'd look out in the audience and I'd see eye rolls and sneers and arms crossed. Today, people are on the edge of their seats. They're looking for this. They're coming to me after a talk and asking questions and, can I fit into your company? Can I fit into your future? What a different mindset in 4 years. You know, it's been just incredible. But we have 50 resource extraction experts in our company, all from Alberta, and we're building a team in Chile. We're recruiting. We're hiring 50 more people in the next 6 months. So, like, the transition's not difficult, to Chris's point. Like, we know how to do this. It's just a function of opening up your mind to the possibilities and the challenges of a mysterious new sector that we don't really know much about. So it's kind of like walking into the unknown as a group.
Yeah, and I think, again, we've been talking about this before when we were chatting before we all come together. There's principle, which is, of course, people want to go on a journey to sustain life on the planet. Of course everybody does. It's a stupid point to imagine they wouldn't. But it's the practicality of it. And it's the reality, the day-to-day reality of, will I have a job? How will the economy work in my country? How am I going to deal with all this? What sort of school, what should my kids be doing at school? Are they being trained for the wrong thing? You know, how do I get them to read the right book? Who's going to be their mentor? So let me come to you, Hamutal, on that. The auto industry, particularly, has been really very misogynistic. Let's not beat around the bush. How can you encourage girls and young women to focus on coming into a career in this wonderfully exciting new mobility, new energy world, new technology world? Can you give people out there some advice on that, please?
I think it's about nurturing the passion for the big picture from a very young age. And if you wait for high school to encourage girls to participate in this industry, in STEM or in technologies, then that's way too late. It needs to happen way earlier when people are developing their skills and their mindset. And the mindset of kind of role modeling girls into caregiving positions rather than activities and creation is a very narrow approach, and the change has to start very, very early on. Specifically, I think one of the drivers for a lot of girls is curiosity, and they want to understand how the world works and how to make it better. And this is something that can really capture their imagination and help them join this industry. So it's no longer oil and gas, it's the energy business, it's the energy sector. And there's a new way of doing things. And just in the same way that at Nano One, when we are trying to create this new supply chain, we're not doing it by adopting old practices that are 40, 30 years old technology that's done in a way that doesn't fit our vision in North America or in Europe. It's the same. We want to be able to capture this notion and this approach and say, come join something new. It's the energy. It's not the old oil and gas industry. It's something else.
Nice, nicely put. Richard's asked a question. What are the long-term consequences to the local ecosystem after lithium has been extracted from it? After site reclamation, will it operate the same without the lithium? I think that's for you, Chris.
I mean, looking at how we develop lithium, I mean, there's sort of two questions in there. One is looking at the sort of environmental ecological side of this aspect. And I think one of the benefits that Alberta's lithium resources will have relative to global sources, we're not mining. So we don't have open pits, we don't have salars, we have conventional, so we're not talking oil sands, conventional oil and gas wells that will be operating just brine and not oil. And so from that standpoint, it's actually, in terms of surface disturbance, quite small. Less than 3% disturbance by land area than a mine or a salar. So we have a really big opportunity actually to do things better in Alberta. When you're looking at the sort of the bigger picture and that sort of ecosystem once lithium is gone, E3 alone has 50 years of production at a rate of 200,000 tons a year. And so that's bigger than the current operation. The largest global production by company is about 80,000 tons a year. So we'll be double that. We'll run for 50 years. Once the lithium is consumed, that's where the recycling comes in.
Yeah.
And I think and there's a question about that, but I think it becomes a very important piece of the life cycle of what we're doing here is bringing more industry to Alberta than just shipping our raw resources out. So bring the recycling, bring the CAM factories, bring the cell factories to Alberta, create that hub that's happening in Quebec right now, so that we have more than just a resource extraction industry propping up the economy.
Yeah, and Christina talked about circular economics and everything, which is pretty essential in all of this. Anyone in the room from Li-Cycle, just out of interest? Can't see anybody. No. Oh, is that? Do you see someone? Okay, maybe at the back. But Anonymous has asked the other question, the one about recycling. Li-Cycle is a pretty significant and impressive Canadian company, for sure. One thing I've noticed as a Brit is there is absolutely a resurgence, and you alluded to it earlier, Hamutal, there, and I think you did too, Amanda, a change in people's mindset, a change in how people see all of this. It is very encouraging, and I think the more we can frame it as a positive, progressive, development thing, rather than a shameful, wear a hair shirt, it's all dreadful, we're all going to hell in a handcart. That's where we go. So Ralph, can I ask you, is the money starting to come in? We talked a bit about that earlier, but some of what we're talking about here, these businesses on stage, Li-Cycle, all these other great things that are happening in Canada. I mean, this is a happening place. Is the money coming into it all?
Well, I think, we're talking about trillion-dollar transition, so we're talking about really sizable equity checks that need to be deployed. And I think you have to break it down into the three components, the VC world, so venture capital, the growth equity stage, and then the more mature infrastructure like pension fund type investments. I think that when you're at the third stage of it, I think capital can flow in very sizable amounts, billions of dollars can flow in single transactions. But that's the most de-risked part of the spectrum, and that's not where we are. So then the question is, well, what about growth equity? What about venture capital? And what you're finding in energy transition is that the numbers are really, really big, and the market are not used to those kind of numbers. So when you go to VCs and you ask them for 10 million, that's fine. If you ask them for 500, that's a whole different ballgame, and they don't know how to cope. And so how do you bridge that gap? How do you do that? I think the financial markets are starting to realize this gap and are starting to raise energy transition funds that are designed to plug the gap. But where the biggest challenge comes is where you have still technology risk and offtake risk. And I think that's where there's a role for somebody to de-risk that. And we're seeing that come through in the European market, whether it's on the regulatory side, and just providing visibility of the demand. Now, if I contrast just for a second batteries with the hydrogen economy, in batteries, you know the demand is coming, you know when it's coming, you know how to build it, you know where the minerals are. In hydrogen, you don't know where the demand is, you don't know how you're going to get it from A to B. So actually, this is a good spot to be in. So.
Yeah, okay. I know Chris wanted to say something there. Were you just, Ralph, were you involved in that business of getting Mercedes and Volkswagen over here with the German government and the...
I wasn't personally, I don't know if colleagues from RBC were, to be honest, but I think the collaboration piece, which I think everybody has talked about, is so critical because it's about value chain. Unless you can bring people together and de-risk propositions, this doesn't get solved. And so I think this is a great example of the collaboration that happened.
I was a bit jealous of that because I thought, why aren't we seeing it in our country? But then I couldn't remember what prime minister we had at the moment, which one it was. So
putting you on the spot.
It's possibly one. Amanda, quick one for you there. It was, how soon could we see commercial? No, sorry. Where was it? There was one in there for you, Amanda, a moment ago. I don't know where it's gone. Oh, here we go, yeah. Thanks for lighting that up. What would you say was the key differentiator for your success in raising R&D investment?
Key differentiator for our success. Ooh. You know, I think this comes back to our Alberta roots as well, because we weren't kids coming out of a lab in a university bringing a technology to the world. We are oil and gas operators with a lot of dirt on our work boots, coming back to solve problems that we know exist in the field. And so it's really given us an opportunity to very quickly get traction with customers because we speak their language. When a plant manager tells me, "You're not effing coming into my plant," I'm like, "Hey, I get it. I've been there before.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. Here's what we're going to do."
Yeah.
And so I think that the knowledge that we bring from, like for me, 18 years of oil and gas experience into the lithium space, it allowed us to accelerate our traction with customers. It allowed us to convince investors that we know what we're doing. And the R&D of the technology just went faster because we knew what we had to come up with in order for it to be operational ready for the field.
Got it. Now, I'm very challenged by watching the clock because I know we have to teach it. So I'm going to ask you all, challenge you all now, another challenge, a yes or no answer to this question. Does Alberta have the full resources needed to make lithium batteries? Could we create them fully in-house and sell the finished product to the global markets? Hamutal, yes or no? Yes.
Yes.
That's a yes, Amanda?
She's doing it.
Yeah, of course. Okay, yeah.
100%.
So that's 4 yeses. So Anonymous asked the question again, but that's a great answer. Okay, just to sort of sum up, go on.
I think the follow-on question is how. So yes, sure, everything is here. Now how do we make it happen?
Amanda.
And when, like the timeline, we can't do this fast enough, really.
There's actually a question about that there as well, and I think that it is about taking risks. Like we're going to have to take a risk if we want to transition a bit. We want to bring an industry that doesn't exist in Alberta today. We're not replacing the current industry. We're just adding to it. We're diversifying our economy. If we want to do that, we're going to have to take some risks, and we're going to have to do it pretty soon if we want to compete globally, or we'll be left behind.
Yep. Right, so in the few seconds we've got to finish, I'd just like to summarize by saying it's great to have you here. It's encouraging, inspiring, in fact, to listen to your stories as to where you are. Great that we've had some super questions from the audience about, again, how do we match principle with practical application? And I've got the hat. I've listened to what you've said. I think I want to be Canadian because, you know, despite the challenge, and I know this is hugely oil and gas country, but the country is about extraction of minerals. We can't get away from that. That's what the future is going to be. So given that's the glorious past of Canada, I think it sets itself well to have a glorious future. So with 1 second left, that's how I would like to finish. Big round of applause for the panel, please.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you.